The next thing that I would like you to do with your interactive paint is to study its ability to be prolonged or even re-wet later on. So we need to have just the interactive paint to do this. So it's fairly easy to just squiggle your paint around like that straight out of the tube. And obviously, as we all know, paint that has just come out of the tube is quite easy to blend wet in wet. And this is how most Western painting has been done since 1450, when oil paint was invented. It's mostly about blending colours wet in wet to get a desired effect. So it's easy when it's just freshly out of the tube. However, I'm going to leave that for half an hour, and we'll come back to it and see what's happening. Now, the first sample strip over here is fast drying, so I've put that to one side. We're now going to look at prolonged drying, which is probably the kind of approach that you would take if you're using Atelier Interactive most of the time. So I'm going to take some of your unlocking formula and put it into a little bowl so that I can access it easily, because I want to keep painting wet in wet, and I can see that the paint over here is still wet. It might be sticky, but it's still wet. Where it's thicker, where it's come straight from the tube, it's still shiny, so I can see it's probably workable. But over here, this is already dry. Can we see that? Can you see my finger? So I want to be able to work on this whole area. So I'm going to start off with this bit here where the paint has dried. I'm putting some unlocking formula on it and allowing it to sweat in there a little bit, and you see it's re-wetting it, isn't it? So you're painting along over here, the paint's gone a little bit, it's tacking up, but if I want to keep it nice and swooshy, the unlocking formula unlocks it. Dip your brush in unlocking formula if you've got a painting which is starting to tack up in places, or where you might have had thinly applied paint, as I had in this area. You can just come back and keep it all in workable condition simply by dipping your brush in the unlocking formula and to keep going. There is a situation that occurs every evening. If you're an artist who's working every day and you sit down in your chair at the end of your day's work and you look at what you've done, then you wish the paint was still wet so that you could just retouch it a little bit or work in there and move something around a little bit. But unfortunately it's dry, and with conventional paint you're left with the problem that if it is dry you have to repaint the whole thing, however extensive that piece might be. Now I would normally use a spray, an atomizer spray. I think I've shown you that elsewhere, but I know you haven't got an atomizer, so I'm going to just take some unlocking formula and dribble it pretty generously onto there, because we've got to re-wet this whole area, and you can see it's re-wetting all right. I've still got a little bit of the yellow paint from what I did last. So I've made a little bit of a mess there, but I'll keep on going because it's quite an attractive looking mess. I just want to have enough unlocking formula to be able to penetrate the paint layer so that the paint is wet and is able to continue in the wet in wet mode. So here we go, it's penetrating that wet paint layer, that dried paint layer, and I'm able to do more blending. As you can see, I can smooth things out a bit if I want to. That's rather uneven. I thought I might like to just repaint that section. So essentially what I'm showing you here is that you're not stuck with what you've got. Need a little bit more liquid here because it's a fairly thick paint layer that I've got to etch back into. But as you can see, I can just integrate the wet paint back into the rest of the wet paint, and I can manipulate it just as if I was just continuously painting wet in wet, rather than doing what I am doing, which is coming back to a dry painting and doing a little bit of rearrangement of it. I think this is a really remarkable thing to be able to do this.